Welcome everyone to today's social system mapping OnRamp session for August 14th, 2023. And where's my, too many things open. Okay, so your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, and Kara Martner is on tech support and our producer. And so I'm just jumping in. There's a big piece that I'm going to try and go through quickly because we're starting to do it in these sessions. And anyway, I'm just going to go forward. So our agenda for today is we're going to do some intros in the chat box in a moment. Then I'm going to introduce you, do a really brief introduction to social system mapping, what it is, and our theory of transformation. And then Julia Beebe, our guest today, is going to share the Welcoming Neighbors Network connections map. And then we'll open it up for some questions and answers that will, I think, go in both directions. And Amy or Kara, can you ping Amy in Slack and tell her, give her the right link? It looks like she's trying to join my other Zoom link. And then, so we'll have questions and answers. And then at the formal piece of our discussion today will be, we'll go to the top of the hour. But then for anyone who's interested in sticking around, I will still be here for a half an hour for any kind of just further questions, formal, informal conversation, etc. And I haven't checked in with Julia if she's going to stick around for that or not. Are you planning on it, Julia?
Happy to if folks are around.
Great, cool. So I see Richard, welcome. If you'd like to quickly unmute and say, just do a ABC mic check, that'd be great. Just to make sure that you're.
Yeah, hi. Rich Wald from the UK, been working with Jim, so you sent me the invite. Looking forward to the session.
Good, thanks. And then, okay, so we'll start with our intros in the chat, and I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other while we're doing this. And if you could go into the Zoom chat and just put the first thing we want to see, if you're willing, it's not a command, but if you're willing to share your name, pronouns, location. And welcome, Veronica. Not seeing Veronica. Hi, Yana. We're putting our names, our pronouns and locations into the chat. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Maybe Veronica's on the iPhone, but anyway, glad you could join us today. And then if you're done with that, what's one primary network that you're part of or working with, or that you're currently focused on? If you could put that in the chat. Yana has new glasses and she looks like she's moved from the United States to Europe. Which she has. And then once you're done with that, what brings you here today? Monday. That's what brings me. Monday at 10 o'clock. Lovely. Okay, well, welcome all of you, and especially appreciate the work that you do with the networks that you're part of, and happy to see you here with us. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I'm going to do a really rapid test. We're going to do a test of how clearly yet quickly and succinctly I can do what's coming next. So this is our introduction to what is social system mapping. And so social system mapping, I like to say it's a mashup of essentially a social network map, something like an asset map, concept maps, system map, stakeholder map. All of these kinds of maps can be part of, integrated into a social system map. And so it's going to look like kind of what you expect from those different kinds of maps. It's going to have nodes or dots and lines. Maybe they're rectangles, but it's going to have these bloppy things and lines connected. And so visually, it will make you think of any of those maps, but it's different from them in that a social system map is contains dimensions of all of those maps. So it's far more dynamic and dimensional and complex than any of those other kinds of maps are. And it's also a social system map is online, it's interactive, and it's accessible to everyone in a network generally. And it's iterative and emergent, and it's dynamic because you can continue to make changes over time and you can track changes in a network over time. And so really it's much less of a product and much more of a process or collective practice. And so that's what a social system map is. And so why do we do social system mapping? Essentially, we do that to support systemic transformation. The intention is to support a global movement that already exists, that you're probably certain all part of in one way or another, trying to shift from systems of dominance and exploitation and extraction to systems of connection and reverence and regeneration in one way or another, from one kind of dimension or another. And so what we've learned in the last few decades about systemic transformation and system change is that supporting systemic transformation really requires two major things. It requires strong networks, and it requires that those networks include wise change agents. And so I like to talk about these two things. I mean, I talk about two shifts, and the two shifts are sort of the two high level, very simplified pathways necessary to creating that shift from systems of dominance to systems of connection. And the first one is a relational shift. So meaning shifting from a sense of ourselves as separate, solitary, not connected, to starting to have a more porous sense of ourselves, to understanding that we're part of broader systems, and a sense of connection. So going from a separate self to an interdependent self is, or a connected, interbeing kind of a self. That's one of the shifts that we're focused on, and that is absolutely crucial for systemic transformation. And the other is what I call a cognitive shift, which is going from it's shifting our worldviews from being mechanistic and sort of a bunch of cogs, and if you just push the right buttons, the right change will happen, and we can determine how change is going to emerge, to really having a far more complex and living systems mindset, and understanding that there are many orders of impact, many perspectives. There's a whole lot to take into consideration, and how do we function well in that kind of a context, and understand that we can't impose change on a system. We have to nurture the conditions, and what are those conditions for creating the kinds of change we're looking for. So those are the two shifts. And the truth is that you can look at them both and you can say, yeah, Christine, it's the same thing. You're just talking about it differently. It's, building relationships is the same as having a living systems perspective, and having a living systems perspective requires understanding relationships. And I would say, you're right. That's absolutely true. And at the same time, if we're only if we pretend that this two-dimensional thing that's pretending to be a three-dimensional thing in the middle of this image is reality, is this shift that we're talking about. Often because these two shifts are generally coming from different fields, different ways of framing the problem. So they have different foci that we think about them differently, and we be present with them differently. And if we're only looking, so if we're looking at this shift, if we're only looking at it, say, from a relational perspective, we're going to see certain aspects of it. If we're only looking at it from a complexity perspective, we're going to see other aspects of it. And either perspective is absolutely true, but the perspectives eclipse each other and hide things. And so if we only ever look at it from the relational perspective, there's going to be important pieces to the puzzle that we're missing out on, and vice versa. So we need to be looking from both angles, and we need to be looking from both angles frequently, regularly, because they feed each other. The more we build strong relationships and trust, the more we're able to really open up our minds and see the world in new ways. And the more we understand the need for that, the more we understand the value of building strong relationships. And so these things need to be constantly cycled through, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, to make sure that we're not losing track of how things are changing, and we're seeing how they're impacting each other. So that's a very super fast, big, high picture explanation of what's we feel have come to understand is needed for systemic transformation. And we believe that social system mapping can help with both of those things. And I am noticing that this, oh, okay, good. I don't have to do the other one right now. Yeah. I thought the vortex was in here, but it's not. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It just doesn't matter. We'll do that another time. But so I'm going to hand it off to Julia to share her map in just a moment, but just to give a little teeny bit of technical background. So going from the very high level philosophical zoom down to bits and bytes quickly. So Julia's going to share the social system map that her community has been creating together. And but just the tools used for creating a social system map consist of two different technological platforms, both of which are online, both of which can be subscribed to. One is sumApp. sumApp is for gathering the data from a network. So these wise change agents, what are they doing? Who are they, et cetera. This tool, the sumApp tool, is a tool that my partner and I developed and continue to work on and enhance. The data is gathered in the sumApp tool. The data is then put into a graph visualization platform called Kumu. So Kumu is what actually visualizes all those dots and lines that I was referring to. And this is the piece that's interactive. Well, everyone can input data into sumApp, but then the data is as represented in Kumu can be interacted with by the network. And then once the data is in the Kumu map and the map looks the way you want it, then you take a link from there and put it back into sumApp so that the network members only see this one interface. They see that where they can input their data and they can see the map in the same interface. But the people like Julia who work to build this kind of a project have both interfaces. And I like to clarify that right up front, especially in this introductory session, because that's can be a piece of confusion for people, is the map is actually in two places and knowing the difference is helpful. Okay, so handing it off now to Julia Beebe, who's the network manager of the Welcoming Neighbors Network, who has been working with this map, and I think Jana Flissrand, who I said moved to Europe and has new glasses. Jana helped catalyze this map and initiate it in the first place, and Julia's been working with it since. And I'm just going to hand it over and let Julia walk you through her map and share what's going on. And where did we go? Okay, there you are. All right, we can see you.
Okay. You can see and hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. My name is Julia, she, her pronouns, calling from New Haven, Connecticut. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Welcoming Neighbors Network and our member leader connections map. And so just a little bit of orientation to who we are as a network. We're a network of local organizations that are pushing for pro-housing policies. And so our members' pro-housing municipal and state legislative campaigns are really aimed at being able to build more housing and more different kinds of housing in order to hopefully help tackle our nation's housing affordability crisis. And our network strength really springs from our members. That's sort of the heart of our network and what we're trying to do. So there's just a huge amount of wisdom within this network, and an opportunity for folks to learn from each other about running and winning these campaigns, and then hopefully sharing lessons with their sister organizations so we can repeat successes, learn from mistakes, and then really kind of tackle creatively joint challenges. So kind of three primary areas of work for us. The first is creating this dynamic and relational network of pro-housing advocates and organizers. And that's through several shared platforms and live opportunities for peer learning and connection. So those include kind of a peer consultation model, peer learning groups. We've done kind of in-person regional gatherings recently, and also includes these maps. A second area is serving as an incubator and accelerator for pro-housing efforts. And then third, providing resources and facilitating resource connections for policy campaigns. This first area, which is sort of where I'm focused, is really at the heart of our work and figuring out how do we build really kind of a robust dynamic network. A robust dynamic network that's interconnected and where our member leaders are really oriented toward each other. So not really kind of coming through us as only the center, but really kind of reaching back out to each other and creating a really kind of interconnected network of relationships. So why a network? I think all of you are probably could kind of imagine some of this, but we think having this type of network can help groups win locally and at the state level on their housing campaigns for a few different reasons. One, it helps enable individuals and organizations to build strong relationships across the movement. Second, it provides opportunities for member-led peer learning, troubleshooting, and strategizing. And I would say this is a work in progress that we're trying to move to a place that's increasingly member-led and getting folks to kind of take that initiative and really think to turn toward each other. And then the third is that we sort of act as a resource hub, so allowing people to centralize their resources and lessons learned from across the country. I think we'll have a lot of time for Q&A, but if people have like a clarifying question as I go, feel free to, probably can't see your hand, but just unmute and interrupt me. That's totally fine. This is just a snapshot of some of our organizations all over the country. So our member leader connections maps. So I want to, I guess, preface this by saying my training is and my work experience for the last decade is as an organizer. So much of what Christine was saying was resonated and around relationships, and yet social systems mapping and these particular tools of sumApp and Kumu are new to our network, new to our director, and new to me. And so we're very much learning. And I kind of want to preface this by saying that because I think I'll have more questions for you all maybe than you'll have for me. And I'm just really eager to learn from all of you. But at the start of our network last year, one of our co-founders, Jana with New Glasses in Switzerland, suggested creating this kind of network map based on kind of experience with maps Jana had seen in other networks. And there were a couple of reasons, at least as it's been articulated to me by our director, why we were sort of interested in creating this map. One was we had this desire to give our member leaders, who are sort of individuals that belong to the organizations that are members of the network, to give them as many tools as possible to proactively connect with one another. And then the second was a recognition that this would be a way of member leaders kind of seeking each other and finding each other based on skills and expertise that they're looking for. And so Henry, our network director, with feedback I understand from you, Jana, really set up this map, set up kind of the information we wanted to collect. And since then, since this past winter, I've sort of taken over. There has been very minimal reformatting since the initial kind of creation, very, very minimal. And so I think you'll see parts of this that could absolutely change, and be very eager kind of for feedback for how to make this a lot more legible. These maps live in our shared resource library. And so people kind of fill out the information, as Christine was describing, through a sumApp, and then they go to a shared resource library that has a lot of great things like policy templates and organizing best practices, and also houses these maps. And as people are joining the network, I'm kind of giving them an onboarding to all of the opportunities to connect with one another, including these maps. So I'm just going to take you through a few of these maps. And I believe that Christine's colleague Tim has made it so you can't see people's faces. So not quite as engaging or pretty, but we can still kind of get a sense. So if I click here, I should be taken to Kumu. Are you all seeing the map now? Okay, great. So this is our map that sort of maps out how people are connected to one another. You'll see kind of a hub here in the middle. And I would say that the hubs have mostly worked to be between kind of folks like Yana and Henry, our director, people who have been in this movement and helped found this network, who are very kind of in relationship with other people. And then you also have sort of like regional areas like this, where people kind of work at the same organizations within the same regions. And then there are 4 levels of connection, sort of indicated by the strength of the color of the arrows. So, I mean, this might be familiar to folks, but kind of the lowest level of connection is recognizing somebody's name. A second level of deeper connection is having interacted with them online. A third is having interacted with them via phone or video or in person, kind of a more two-way type of conversation. And then most kind of meaningful collaboration connection being having collaborated with someone on something meaningful. And so I think you can just kind of get a sense of what this looks like. I'll say with this, because our members are organizations, and within that there are member leaders who fill this out, a lot of this isn't necessarily shocking. And I think we're still trying to figure out kind of like how to maximize the value of what people can learn from this. Like, people tend to be connected with other folks who have been in the pro-housing movement for a while and help start this network, and with people in their state and region. So I'm gonna try to get back out of this if I can. Oops. So a second map is our member leaders by skills to share map. So again, we'll go back to Kumu here. And as you can see, this sort of maps out the skills that folks have. And I think this one actually does still seem to have names, so I just won't hover over stuff, but you can kind of see the types of skills. So things like social media and graphic design, member volunteer recruitment, kind of a huge range of different skills. And again, if you hover over folks' names, you can kind of see the skills they have, as well as if you go to a skill, kind of who has that. I think people who have used this, and I know personally, have generally found this helpful by using this sort of search function at the top. And so you can take a look here to find something. So you could see, you know, who has experience with community organizing, which I would think are a lot of people within the network. And then you kind of see these dots, who would have faces typically, to sort of see who has those skills. And then the third and final map I'm just going to show quickly is our policy expertise map. So this is similar. Formatting is a bit unusual, and I've personally had trouble kind of making any visual sense of this. So I'm very eager to hear how we might reorganize this. But again, here you kind of have a specific policy. So this is, rather than skills, a specific policy expertise. So that could be building codes, it could be mandates for affordable housing, and then it maps out through these lines who has that policy expertise. Again, I think this tends to be easiest to use if you sort of choose a policy expertise. So if you want to see who has experience with parking reform, you can click that and see who has that experience. And usually these would not be just gray dots, but faces, of course, you click those faces and you can see kind of folks' contact information and everything you would need to connect with those people. So those are 3 or 4 maps. We have one more map that just kind of maps out the organizations people are at, but I wanted to prioritize those. So I just wanted to talk through, kind of successes and challenges and questions related to these maps. So on the success side, we've seen individuals using these maps to connect with one another, which is exactly what we want to happen. So a recent example, I was connecting with a person who was hired with one of our organizations in Massachusetts to do comms work. And she was really eager to kind of connect with other people within this pro-housing space on communications, and was able to use our map to find who else has these skills and has a role similar to hers in organizations across the country, and was then able to contact them directly. And has set up a series of one-on-ones with basically everyone who plays this role within the network. So I think kind of at its best, that's what we want to be seeing, and that's really great. I think we're also getting better at regularly requesting member leaders to add and update their connections. So we've been kind of systematizing that rather than it just being sort of on an ad hoc basis as folks remember. So most recently, that's been through our 6-month monthly evaluation. And so that will be sort of a routine part of that evaluation. And then as folks join, like I said, in the onboarding, this is a request for them to make sure their teams add their information. And this really allows us to track changes in the number and depth of connections between member leaders over time. Obviously, that information is only as good as it's sort of updated. And so making sure it's updated is extremely important. But once it is, it really helps us see, you know, how are people connecting more and more deeply with one another. And then challenges, I would say there's still a lack of significant network-wide engagement with the maps. I don't think this is like a tool that folks are turning to a lot and really using as more than kind of a simple member directory. And I think there's clearly a need for kind of greater coordinating team investment and integrating the maps into our network culture and practice. And, you know, I guess I'll say here, just sort of in the interest of transparency, I think there is sort of a question for me and for our coordinating team. It's like, how do we fit this into all of the other programs and tools that we offer folks? So a lot of my attention has gone to sort of in-person and live virtual spaces where people get peer consultation from one another, where they connect around areas of shared interest, which I think are, it's very like concrete how people use that and build with each other. And so unfortunately, the maps have gotten less sort of time and dedicated time to using them. And so I think we're trying to figure out sort of what's the right amount of time that goes into this, understanding that there'll be a need for training and agitation and support for people to actually get the most out of these maps. The second is, I think, the formatting and visual challenges to using the maps easily and meaningfully. I know personally I've used them mostly as sort of directories, and I feel like there's much more we could get out of that, even just sort of like kind of on a visual level. And so I think that's been somewhat of a struggle. And then I think continuing to seek out examples for how similar maps have been used meaningfully and consistently in service of network building to help inspire us as a coordinating team and then kind of spark the imagination of other folks in the network. I think that before I kind of turn over to some of my questions, I think we see really clearly the value of the map in being able to track connections and how those change over time. So I think that kind of internal benefit to our network and seeing how this changes and grows and being able to report that out feels really clear cut. I think what we're having a slightly harder time envisioning is like, how do our members meaningfully use this? And how does this fit into kind of all the other programming we do? So just kind of, if I may, ask some questions of you all, and, I'm happy to take some questions first before you all dive in, but would be very eager, if the conversation allows, to hear from all of you. Like, what are examples that you all have from your networks or networks you've worked with of these maps being useful and contributing to network connectivity? I know before the call started, Christine was able to share a few kind of general examples, which was helpful. how do you train people on the use of these maps, and how do you ensure people keep the maps up to date? And then, I know we may or may not get to this point, but if folks have thoughts, feel free to email me. What formatting or technical suggestions do you have to make our maps easier to navigate? And I'll just close with a thank you. This is our website if you want to learn more about the network, and then my email if you would like to reach out to me. And I think with that, I'll stop sharing, and then we'll just, I guess, turn it back to you, Christine, for this next portion.
Thanks. Well, do we want to, we've got 20 minutes. We'll stop at like 5 minutes beforehand so Rebecca can make some announcements, but before the top of the hour. How do people have questions for Julia? Do we want to jump into her questions? Sorry, I'm not facilitating super focusedly. Yana facilitating.
Also, Yana has been really instrumental to making this a part of the network. So feel free to jump in, Yana, with anything else.
I had a question. I'm just going to ask it, Julia, for you. The view with the lines. What was going on? Like, what was I mean, I know how you make a line in just the instruction in Kumu, but what was the logic that was placing the nodes on the lines, and why do you know why that was used?
I don't actually, but as I was exploring, I was like, this is weird. And I don't know, Yana, if you have a sense of that. My sense from our director is like it sort of had just how it happened, and so I think we were trying to figure out. I think we both sensed that this should look differently, but weren't quite sure in what direction it should go in. Visually, I don't find it like very supportive personally, just to sort of see it like that. So I think we're trying to figure out what a different shape might be. I don't know, Yana, if you want to add anything there. If not, I see Rebecca, you have your hand up. Yeah, maybe go to Rebecca.
I was looking at your questions and thought I would share one instance of using network mapping results to contribute to connectivity. And this was a while ago. It was in the context of a study of 2 cancer prevention coalitions in Appalachia. And they had been chosen because one of them was more successful than the other. And so the Penn State-based broker for all of these coalitions was interested in understanding whether patterns of connection explained any of the differences in their respective performance. So what we found was that one of the I'll just go out and say the less successful coalition was more cliquish. That was sort of supported by the one meeting I went to and I watched. There was a sort of a sense that some people knew each other really well and were friends and were sharing baby photos. And also at the end of the meeting, the coalition leader announced that she was burned out and she was going to quit. And so the other coalition, the higher performing coalition, had no clicks. And so I typically don't have a chance to share back results directly with members of coalitions. In this case, I did. And I was able to show the less successful coalition that they were not as inclusive as they had thought they were. And the leaders were really surprised by that because they experienced the coalition as very welcoming, whereas people structurally at the periphery of the coalition said things like, if you show up in a business suit, they'll eat you alive. We didn't share that quote in our briefing, but it was to me a really profound example of because network results can be sensitive. And I also think there are respectful ways to share back with people important factors that an individual, especially an active individual, just literally can't see. And one facet of that is inclusion. So that's my example.
Sure, that's great. Thanks, Rebecca. I guess that makes me think, well, two things that come to mind hearing that. One is, I think we've thought about like how to use the results internally to track progress, but like ways of building that out into the network and having that held kind of collectively and heard from our member leaders and reflecting about it together and kind of marking progress as a collective. The other is just sort of, I think we've thought a lot about, or I guess more than other things, about sort of like the number of connections and the strength of connections, but not really like the shape the map takes and sort of where there are like nodes of connection and how that plays out. So I think that's kind of a helpful reminder as well. I see your hand up, Yana.
So I have worked with a network map like this while leading a network before, and found it really helpful. And let's see, I have a meeting set up with Julia soon and can share these thoughts there. But if other folks don't have things to say, it might be useful to the larger group as well. So I'm going to watch for hands because I don't want to take up too much space here. Two ways, looking at your first two questions, both how to make them useful and contributing to connectivity, but also how do you train people on it, that we did. Here's to hoping I don't forget the second before I get done explaining the first, is that we would look at the map and talk about examples of network culture and relationship. And so talking about if you've got too few people at the hub of your map and somebody moves to Switzerland, what happens? What does that mean for your network? And how does that harm you? And how do you make sure that you're not putting too much weight and too much pressure on one person, as a way of encouraging, reminding, training people into a culture of always building multiple relationships and thinking about how do we spread that around so that we're most resilient, or talking about how do you be welcoming or how do you recognize cliquish behavior, but using the map to talk through both those values and those principles and examples of where there are opportunities for change. So you can do it technically, or you can do it very conversationally and accessibly, and that helps people see and learn and understand the map. And so we would do presentations at network events of the map and talk about how it had changed, talk about where we saw strengthening, talk about things that we wanted to do differently as ways of doing that. We would also do that with individuals and talk about what opportunities they might have and where they might be able to contribute more, or why they might want to choose to step back sometimes. So that was something that we found pretty effective. Something else that we did in that network is we used some of the metrics that you can spit out of Kumu about connectivity and the strength of relationships in our grant reporting. And we use that for applying for additional funding or reporting back on the change and why, like we used it to justify our investment in relationships and activities. And we also use those same numbers to communicate to members the change that was happening in the network so that members could understand, you keep talking about this network thing, why? I don't get it. And it helped them understand, oh, the academics say that this matters apparently. And look, we made the thing move in the right direction for what the academics say is good. So we feel good about that. And that helped us build commitment to following up and providing more data in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Yana. I know we'll have a chance to kind of go into this more one-on-one. Jim, I see your hand up.
I just had a question for you, Julia. So you've got these strength of relationship indicator on the end. So if it's moving, you can see that. But I'm wondering what your sort of theories of change are in between. Do you expect people to have, and I'm sorry, and on the front end, you've got the visual directory piece, where your people can connect using the tool. But in the middle, what are you looking for? Are you looking for people to be involved in activities together? And if so, might you add that as a question in the map so that you can track attendance and activities as a way of moving towards greater connection strength? And the other question is, maybe, are there flows? Are you expecting to see information exchanged or resources flowing through the network? And would you then want to build those into the question so that you could see those intermediate kinds of things? And I'm just curious what your theory of change is there.
Yeah, those are great questions. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of and kind of a growing number of network activities, and I feel like they are sort of disconnected from this map. So I think that's sort of a missed opportunity. We've built out a new peer consultation model that launched in May when someone, we had a group that was trying to build stronger relationships with environmental and conservation groups, for example, and kind of put this to the network, and we got peer consultants together, and they gave kind of provided insight and lessons learned. That was really, really powerful. We have peer learning groups when people come together around kind of identified topics of interest. Last week, 6 of our member organizations and about 25 individuals in our network came together in New York City. I was there, which was fun. In person, I was like very kind of concretely building relationships with each other, and I was really in the evaluation, people just like, I think this is not surprising to any network builder or organizer, but just like how powerful it felt to build together and people just expressing that. But I don't think we've really captured any of that in the map. I think we think that hopefully, like, now people have come together, they'll update their relationships, but there isn't a way right now, to your question, Jim, for people to sort of say, like, this is what I've done within the network on the map. And then with the information flows, we do have the shared resource library, and that's meant to be crowdsourced so that people identify what's missing, and then they let us know, and they send us their best kind of, resources, best practices. Again, that's sort of something we track, but we're not tracking right now kind of on the map or any visual way that can be shared. So I feel like there are opportunities for both of those, but because a lot of work is happening, and it's just not necessarily captured in the maps at this point. I don't know if that gets at your questions.
Yeah, and one thing it makes me think of is those stories. That could be a question on the map. It says, what was a stimulating experience at this last gathering? And I've just found when I see those stories on a persistent map, I wasn't at the event, or I didn't get to meet everybody to see their stories, little paragraphs. And you can do it as a pop-up. You can just roll over the connections. I had this amazing connection with so-and-so. Or anyway, those are views that are possible if you collect that data, and it's really humanizing and stimulating.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Just writing that down.
Anyone else have either responses to Julia's questions or questions for Julia?
I guess, I have another question that, I guess, because, so maybe I didn't say this, I think I said it in passing, but not explicitly, that our members are organizations, 30 organizations. And within those organizations, we have member leaders, who are the individuals that participate in our network activities. So I guess I am curious if folks have, because, so some of the connections, like I said, seem really obvious. It's like people are connected to the people they work with day in, day out in their organization, or the groups in California know each other best. So in some ways there's like not a lot of surprises on the connections map and kind of how they connect. So also just curious if for folks who've worked in networks of organizational members, ways this has been helpful as well, I guess.
I'm going to think who has worked with organizations. Yana, the new Hab map was organizations, wasn't it?
By definition, our members were individuals who were affiliated with organizations, but we didn't have
Yeah.
organizational members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The OnRamp map is, I mean, it's a network of organizations, but again, we mapped individuals, not the organizations. And we've had some, it's been a while since actually, I hadn't thought of this, but it's been a while since we've done anything with organizations
Yeah.
as the nodes. Yeah.
And we have mapped, we've mapped the individuals that are in that organization. So that is what's reflected, but it means there are nodes like wherever there's an organization, basically, because
Yeah.
those 6 people are their direct colleagues.
Yeah. Did you standardize the organization names so that you can see, so that there's one organization? Well, you're not clustering on organizations, I'm guessing, but that would be what I was thinking was, I was trying to think how to, in a sense, remove those silos, like start to look across the silos to see how many. Yeah. This is a question that in a map that actually Amy and I are working on together. It's a similar, it's a map of individuals, but it's a very siloed organization. And they're trying to see connections across the silos. Which is a little bit tricky because you have to like do this removal thing. And then anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
When we figure it out, we'll let you know.
Perfect.
But in the meantime, I see you're not clustering on organizations. And if the organization names were similar, as Christine said, you could see the level of silo if they were, separate groups of people and they weren't connected across multiple organizations.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
how many organizations are there? How many people and how many organizations does that map represent? Roughly.
I haven't, so we have 30 member organizations and about 120 folks. They're not all on the map yet, but about 120. We do have a map that shows the organization they work for. That map is really just what it sounds like. So it's not super engaged. But is there a way, Jim, that you're saying we would do that on that kind of initial network map, like the connections map?
You're muted.
I didn't realize you had so many organizations with 130 organizations and 120 people on the map.
Or no, sorry, 30 organizations.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, you could do it the way you did clustered around policy or clustered around whatever the other thing was. But that's all. It would just be just like a cluster map that you've already done, but for the organizations.
Well, and I'll just add, so if you do a cluster map, the reason I was asking how many organizations is because the more there are, the more tedious this is. But if you cluster on the organizations and then you take the organizational nodes in Kumu, if it's placing read-only data on a map, this is just background information, don't try to remember this. But if it's placing read-only data on a map, the nodes won't stay put, that you can't define where they sit in space. And sumApp is, if you're using the hot link, it is read-only data. So it can't permanently place nodes on the map using sumApp data. But in any given view, if you drag a note somewhere on the background and let it go, it will stay there until you refresh the view. And so you could take the 30 nodes that represent the organizations and drag them far apart in a big circle around the middle. And then the people who stay in the middle, you can see those are the people who are crossing the silos. That's a crude and not clean, nice way of doing it, but you could do that. And as opposed to looking for seeing the silos, if you want to see the people who are bridging across the silos, right, you could run the betweenness scores, and then the betweenness is basically the people who would end up in the middle also, if you did that visual thing. So we'll often run betweenness and then do some of you where we're having a darker shadow or something like that for the people with the highest between this.
Got it.
We've got just a few minutes left. Any other questions that anyone has for anyone related to this map? Jim?
Sorry. So do you do activities, Julia, with go on treasure hunts with the folks to explore the visual directory piece of it, the find you, find them. I'm wondering if that's an activity that's engaging. Again, it's only visual directory. It's not deeper sense making, but that's a start.
Yeah, we haven't done that. So I think we ought to be thinking about how we, like, I think right now the information is like, people put it in, they use the map as they're going to use it. We use it for metrics. But it hasn't been, I guess, to what you were saying, Yana, like we haven't had a kind of a conversational analysis about this with our members. So I think, yeah, a conversation, a treasure hunt, some kind of like group, just like kind of looking at this together and kind of seeing where we're at, I think could be really interesting. And I think there are, you know, like we're going to do something at the end of the year and end of year, you know, there are opportunities that we could be doing that. But yeah, I like that idea. And I think we need to figure out kind of how to look at it together more than we are doing right now.
It seems like there's a bit of a shift from it was created top down. And if you want to move it to bottom up, you're going to have to shift the benefits to the bottom.
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's certainly what we want. So I think that's sort of the move we have to make.
This is great, Julia. Thanks. I'm gonna hand it over to Rebecca in just a moment, but I just want to say that I have observed lots and lots and lots of these projects, or heard back about them and implemented lots of them myself, tons of them. And don't feel bad like you're making progress. Like you're actually done a lot more than a lot of projects at this point. I was sort of surprised and impressed to hear because I didn't know what to expect. And I knew you had questions, but you've actually been doing a lot. And the questions that you're grappling with are sort of perennial questions for this whole community that we're all sort of trying to figure out and grappling with, and it's all contextual. So you're always trying to figure out how to do it in whatever your context is. And it's not, you know, there aren't precedents that we can just sort of copy what other people have done. So you've actually shared stuff with us that's new and helped us think, and you're you know, like doing well. And these things that you're talking about are the things that we grapple with here in this group all the time and try to figure out how to implement and etc. So you're welcome to join us in that adventure to the degree that you find it helpful. We're all learning together. So I just want to say thanks. Thanks a lot for sharing, and feel good about what you've done so far. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rebecca.
Sure, just wanted to let everybody know that next Monday, we will be unveiling the new sumApp survey interface. And then on Monday, September 11th, we will have another SenseMaking session. So hope to see you there.
Okay. So I think we'll just go ahead and give a couple minutes back to whomever needs to stop at the top of the hour. But what we'll do is we'll, in just a moment, we'll do our goodbye, our closing ritual. And then if you need to jump off, just feel free to jump off as soon as we've done that. And then, sorry, my cat is trying to crawl across my keyboard and bug me. And, and then if you want to stick around and chat some more, just don't leave when at the top of the hour when everyone else is leaving, and just stick around, and then we'll open it up and see where it wants to go. So thank you all. Oh, so the closing ritual is I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1. So before I do that, let's all unmute if you want to participate in this. So we're going to unmute, count down. When I get to 1, we're just all going to give each other our blessings all at the same time and our well wishes for the day so that you can go on and feel good closure from us. So, and I just want to say for the people who are brand new or who haven't been here very much, I was thinking about this clicky thing, and I was thinking about how some of us really know each other really well and grapple together all the time. And I'm always concerned about not making the newer people feel left out. And so to the degree I have failed to do that, I would love to hear feedback about what would be helpful. So at this point, though, we're going to close. So feel free to email me if you've got thoughts. Any rate, it's all on mute. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
see you all.
Thanks,
Julia.
Take care.
Thank you.